definitely need a headdress for this. I want you to imagine something with tassels. Hi guys, I'm going to introduce to you today Andy Giordano, who is all the way here from the Sugar Bowl Academy in California. Yes?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Worried about this, getting the wrong state. He's the science and photography teacher there. He's also the dean of students. He takes lovely, lovely photographs, which are in the gallery, and we're going to have an opening this evening from 5 to 7. If you're moving around the school, I want you to stop by, have a nosh, and have a chat with Mr. Giordano. So would you please welcome him?
Hi guys, thanks Loretta for the introduction. It was very comprehensive. I'm completely out of things to say. You stole the whole talk. Not true at all. So I'm really appreciative of this opportunity to serve as a Rockwell visiting artist. It's a big opportunity for me because there's no other setting in which I could have so many people see these photos, and so it's really exciting to me for you guys to get a chance to see my work. So thank you to Luetta and thank you to the Taft School for hosting me, for giving me an opportunity to stand up here and ramble at you guys for a little bit. And I guess I want to thank you guys for being here. I know that it's more or less mandatory, but I appreciate it anyway, because certainly if we think of here in a little bit more of a global sense, having you guys here at the school, without you being here, there's no way I would be here, so we wouldn't be able to share this time together and share this opportunity, so I really appreciate it. As a teacher, visiting schools is an exceptional experience. We tend to get really, really insulated and isolated in our own world. You know, we're always busy, or we're at least always saying we're busy. So we get caught up in what we perceive as normal, and the only way to break out of that is to go out and see other schools. So I'm happy and looking forward to spending a little time around campus today. Just as, I guess, there's going to be some slides today where we're talking about some fine art photography. There's also going to be some slides that are a little more photo album-y, I guess, but this is kind of my normal, which is not normal at all. I recognize now that I walk around other schools. It's not unusual for me to wrap up my day and leave my office and go check out the workout that the students are doing and see them carrying each other up like a 30-degree slope in the pouring rain with a former Olympian. I think we get a little used to that kind of stuff, and it's just not reasonable, right? So going and seeing other schools is a great way to get a sense for how education's working for millions of other people around the country. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to hang out with the football team during your service day and work on removing invasive species from the local creek. So thanks fellows for letting me hang out with you and do some of your work for you, and thanks especially to Mr. Hoffman for arranging for me to lift several hundred bags full of leaves and dirt during my school visit here to Taft today. That was great, very thoughtful. In actuality, I made him let me do it, so I'm just giving him a hard time. Working in watersheds is a very organic thing for me. It's almost the perfect service opportunity for my background. Clearing invasive species, exploring streams. This is kind of what I do with my free time. I know that's not very exciting. It might not be like a big Saturday night for you guys, but that's kind of how I roll. You can see evidence of this in this not staged photograph, totally authentic experience with my students here out behind Sugar Bowl Academy. We're looking into empty green nets and pretending to engage with the invertebrates of our stream for a marketing photograph. Maybe everybody's really clean, so this obviously isn't real field work. I got a button-down shirt on, just like today, so obviously not real field work. Open-toed shoes, not real field work. All these rules are being broken, right? This is a little more realistic. Not clean, not not open. So in this photo, two of my students, Jack and Peter, are exploring one of the features of water, which is that it's exceptionally persistent. And you guys who've been in the gallery know that water is like a passion of mine. Water is something I pay close attention to. And one of the ways water behaves is it just doesn't care, right? It doesn't listen. It only listens to gravity. And gravity in this case is undercutting this bank in Blackwood Creek, and Jack and Peter are measuring using lasers. It's very exciting. Using lasers, the amount of undercut. So they're looking at erosion rates. They're trying to understand how the lake is changing over time. So as a science teacher, it's impossible for me to remove that discussion. It's impossible for me to take science out of my photography. That's my perspective. That's what I bring to the table. I'm always thinking in that way. And we're going to get onto that, sort of how our experience crafts our art in a lot of ways, even if it's not artistic experience, a little bit later. But broadly, as a kid growing up, I was always outside. I was always in creeks. And therefore, I think a lot about the behavior of water. I think about how it crafts and hones landscapes. And on an emotional level, I think water is interesting because it's childish, right? It's persistent, it's powerful, it never stops, it's always flowing, it's full of joy, and it can be really peaceful at times. And as a result, it can really add an element to our photographs. As I said, outside, this is the only family picture of me that I've got. Outside, all the time was my behavior. Early on, just laying in the mud, enjoying myself. I can't imagine that if I fell off a bucket nowadays in the mud, I'd be that stoked about it. But when I was 10, I was excessively stoked about it. Apparently it was the best part of my childhood, since it's the only photo I've got. But I grew up on 10 acres outside of Buffalo in a wetland, which is a science code for swamp in upstate New York. And I was a summer camp kid, as I imagine plenty of you guys are. And during camp, some of my most profound memories are creek walks, which are a big deal to a 10-year-old, 12-year-old me. And as the structure of the day, and if any of you guys are camp counselors, you should take note of this because it's a really good strategy. The structure of the day is you take your group, you chuck them in the stream with no plan and no direction. You let them walk as far as they can before lunch. You eat lunch. You let them walk all the way back down. They catch crayfish, they get muddy, they do their thing, and your only job is to make sure that they're alive when the day's over. You don't have to plan anything, you don't have to run any games, you don't have to do anything. Just roll with it. So it's a genius strategy, and as a genius strategy, part of it is in the presentation, right? A lot of it's in the presentation. So the counselor pretends every year as the camper gets older, he's like, okay, this year you get to go a little bit further. And they push the boundaries, they let you explore, and they pretend that maybe you're breaking the rules, right? Oh, I've never seen that turn in the stream. Oh, I've never known that this was here. Oh, we might be near the camp boundary, but I trust you guys, right? So we'll just keep going. And these are strategies if you need to endear yourself to a group of 10 and 12-year-olds at any point in time. If you ever worked with them, you know you must. If you let them think they're doing something they're not supposed to be doing and you trust them, it will work every single time. So besides learning how to be a camp counselor, these experiences growing up engendered me a number of passions. Passion for exploration, and this is a funny picture. So this flagpole is about 40 feet tall. It's right in front of my old school building. We had a big year that year. A passion for natural systems, how they work, so woods and rivers and streams, understanding what they create and how they work together, and a passion for shared experiences, doing things with a group of people with similar goals. So throughout my life, I've taken these joys, these passions, these three things, and I've packed them in my backpack, right? My metaphorical backpack, the tools I carry with me every day, the tasks I carry with me every day, the things that drive me. And that backpack's pretty full. I mean, it's not just passion that gets to go in it. You guys understand, like as students, you have a lot of things that draw on your time. Some of those things you really care about, really deeply, and they're there. Yeah, it works every time. some of these things are the most important things in our lives, and when they happen, they change, right? They sit right on top of all those joys and passions. They reshape your life. But a lot of things come and go, right? The music you like, the movies that you're into, the sports you're playing or watching, the teams you root for, the music that you play, I probably already said that, it doesn't matter. The books you read, these things like ebb and flow, right? They're here one day, they're gone the next. And that's how it works. As we grow and develop, our passions are constantly shifting. And sure, like, I doubt that this particular fantastic imposition on my passions and joys and recreation of myself is like impending for any of you guys, but regular pressures, busyness, success, failure, the demands of your day-to-day life, all these things have an impact on the way that we operate, on the things that we're committed to that bring us joy. So as we're working through our day, we're adding things to our backpack, we're often not even thinking about it. We're not really saying, like, this is my passion. And no matter how often someone says, oh, it's pretty easy, all you have to do is follow your passion, the reality is, like, you're kind of just following a choice that you made behind you and hoping that that passion will carry you through that choice or that it will pay off in some fashion. So without even realizing where you're going, all of a sudden there's a path underneath your feet. There's a way forward. And I think that personally I subscribe to the notion that our journey through life, like, it's not along like I-90, right? There's no one road that defines our directionality. There's no plan that's laid out there, and it doesn't matter how straight it is. So as we're sort of like looking out into the world and thinking about how we're gonna carry ourselves through it, we have to accept a few things, that throughout the world is full of tons of roads and tons of intersections, and they're not all connected. They're really waiting for you, for all of us, for any of us, to connect them, to lay our footprints down on our path and find a way through. Now, sometimes these roads, they're not that obvious, right? We have to plow through them on our own. Sometimes we're lucky and they're arrow straight and we can just work it out. And sometimes going down the road hardly seems worth it at all. It's just not exciting. And then you start chipping away at it and you realize that, well, it was totally worth it. You just had to put a little bit extra work into following that pursuit. So my path began in the woods, as I said, of upstate New York and southern Ontario. And it's gone around the country. It's run through the Adirondacks, up through the White Mountains in New Hampshire, where I spent quite a bit of time in college, out into Montana and the Great Pacific Northwest during grad school. And currently it wanders around the icons of the Sierra Nevada, both literal in John Muir and maybe also literal in the wilderness that his efforts sought to preserve. In each of these places, I stopped. I had a cup of coffee and hung out, and I saw what was going on around me. I connected with the regions. While I was in the Northwest, I was pursuing a graduate degree in zoology, and I was set on being a professional biologist. That was my objective. I wanted to be a professional biologist. I embraced my love for the natural world and decided would be a little strong. I sort of fell into a graduate project that allowed me to explore wild places. And also as a consequence of it, I bought a digital camera. It was my first digital camera. I was 22 years old, and which is pretty late to start a life passion or an artistic pursuit, but that's when I did it. And I bought it for the primary reason of recording my field sites. Now, if any of you guys are scientists or go into the sciences, you will find that using the lab camera to take research shots, to take pictures of subjects, to take pictures of field sites is a pretty cut and dry thing. You're supposed to just take the shot. It should describe the patch. So you can imagine my master's advisor's reaction when I was like, this is my research site. And he's like, where are the salamanders? Where is your net? How big is it? I'm like, I don't know, man. It's beautiful. They're right here. They're in the shade. This transition happened really quickly, like within a month. My camera was in my bag, and it never left it. It's still there. It's always there. This is a fairly standard kit for me. While most of my colleagues in backpacking and trekking and climbing are striving to get their bags down under 30 pounds, mine is never under 60, which is a real drag, I can tell you. And it's mostly down to this brick that I wear on my chest, always ready, always accessible, always prepared to take the photo. So the camera's in the bag. It's right under the baby. I don't know if you guys saw it in that picture or not. So it's no longer a research tool for me. Now it's a motivator. It's the thing that gets me out of bed before most people to take pictures of sunrises. It's a tool that drives me to get deep, to get lost in wilderness without trails where other people tend not to go. And it's that extra push, even though it's literally dragging me back through the force of extra gravity, it carries me up the large mountains to have shared experiences and adventurous experiences with my friends. So this is all happening during grad school, which turns out is a fairly demanding time. And back at school, when I wasn't doing these other things that I showed you, my life was a lot different. My work was carried out mostly in the laboratory. So I'd spend my afternoons in the lab, headphones in, poring over DNA patterns, trying to understand things about my system. I'd spend my afternoons in a climate-controlled chamber, which you guys might know is a walk-in fridge, with 400 of my best amphibian friends in single cups, changing their water, feeding them, measuring them. It was fascinating, and also like the most boring thing of all time at the same time. So it was tough. It was tough to have these pulls of field work in the wild, photography, but also to have this interest in genetic expression. That's really what I was getting into, understanding how genes play a role in the way we look, in the way organisms look, how they interact with the wild. So I was getting into this idea of what we call phenotypic plasticity, which is just how flexible are we? You know, we're given these genes from our parents. How flexible are we? What will we look like? And I was working in a much simpler system. You can imagine this would be quite challenging with humans, but with salamanders it's pretty easy, just looking at how long it takes them to metamorphose under fixed conditions. And I thought it was great. I thought it was interesting to know how they would respond to a changing environment. And when it comes down to it, it's not second nature for us to think about our characteristics, everything from our height to our laughter and how often it comes, as being flexible. They feel like intractable parts of who we are. But the reality is our environment plays almost as much of a role in that stuff as do the genes we inherited from our parents. You certainly wouldn't imagine that the genes were the only things your parents gave you. I'm sure the time spent with them had some impact on your personality at this point. And there's no way to understate it. There's no way to understate how important environment is to gene expression, as well as how important it is to our art. Our environment's everything. And in this context, what I want to kind of break from this dialogue for a little bit is to talk about how our environment shapes our perspective. And in photography, perspectives, it's literally everything. It is how we create, and it is what makes us stand out. So I think when we get into an art about the tools a lot, especially photography, there's nothing more exciting than dropping like a month's paycheck on all your photography equipment. We're just like, okay, camera, check, lenses, check, filters, check, bag, check, I got my tripod, check, my remote, I got all this stuff, right? I'm ready to go, right? Nope, not ready to go. It's really complicated. Now you've got all the tools, and you have to build this really deep skill set and make it organic. You have to understand reciprocity, how aperture, shutter speed, and ISO work together creatively to generate a well-exposed image. You have to understand contrast. You have to understand the rules of composition. Even if all you want to do is break them, you still have to understand them. And the list is really quite long. And as you're internalizing that all the time, you're creating kind of, I guess, student photographs. You're creating photographs that are allowing you to practice those skills. So the shift comes when you start to define a perspective. When all that stuff moves into the background, and becomes second nature, and you're really just working on who you want to be and what you want to express. And that comes out, and I'll say it again and probably 30 more times, in your perspective. So we can think of perspective in a number of ways. We can think about it in a really analytical way. So in this photograph, clearly I did not get this shot of these mountain goats by standing at eye level with them. I shifted my perspective up. I was standing on top of a very big rock and looking down on them to generate a feeling of depth. So that's literal perspective. When you learn about perspective in photography class, that's what we're talking about. It's where you are, right? Getting down on a child's level to create a more compelling photograph of that child is one of the messages I'm always giving to parents about how to make their kid photos more interesting. But we can also think about it in a more meaningful way. So the perspective can describe the feeling a photographer brings to the work that they do, what they've done before, what they know, how they were feeling when they took the shot, what their objectives were, even to the level of how they move through the scene as they compose and find that winning shot. Ultimately, what we're talking about is who that photographer is. So this is an example of really deliberate perspective, and one of the better ways to inform your perspective is to focus on shooting things that you love. So this was the title slide that we opened on. It happens to be one of my favorite pictures that I've ever taken. It's one of the more popular ones in the gallery right now, and this is from a very secret place in the Eastern Sierra. I don't think I'll tell you guys because I'm pretty sure it'll go on the internet soon, so it won't be a secret anymore. But perspective is everything in the shot. There were a lot, you can't mess up a sunset like this. You just can't. You can't mess it up. You're going to get a great shot out of it. But how do you make that shot special? Well, from the analytical sense, I was chest deep in this pool, which is very cold, and my camera was only about this far off the surface of the water. So that's the analytical decision I make about perspective where I am. From maybe the more meaningful description that we were talking about, I'm thinking about the feeling I want to impart. Now, the title of this photograph is Refugium, which, from my background, the science background, is a space in between the glaciers. So when glaciers reach their maximum extension point, they leave behind little pockets or safe spaces for organisms to thrive in, places where the forests remain and the animals that are a little bit more mobile will run to and preserve these libraries of genetic diversity and species richness for all time. And then when the glaciers recede, these are the origins of populations throughout the world. And this place gave me that feeling of like a quiet refuge. It's really in the middle of the desert. You can't quite tell, but this is all sagebrush up in here. And the large mountains of the Eastern Sierra are almost 50 miles away in the distance. So as we're considering this spot, this like oasis in the desert, that's all I could think about was this refuge. And how am I going to generate that feeling by using my creative tools to do so? How am I going to get the exposure right to figure that out? How am I going to predict where the clouds are going to be to set the whole thing up? So that's what I mean by perspective in a more meaningful way. And it doesn't matter what you shoot. The exact opposite of this experience, which is a very deliberate one, was this experience. It was a photo I took almost 10 years ago now in Denali National Park in Alaska. Instead of scouting a place and thinking about it and going there and setting up, waiting for the clouds, this happened completely the opposite way. So perspective's pretty clear. We're eye to eye here, right? The analytical perspective. But the emotional perspective is much different. I had climbed up from my campsite to take this shot and had framed a totally different shot. I had framed the rest of this group of Dall sheep up on the slope. I'm like, this is going to be a great shot. It's going to be National Geographic cover, which has literally never happened and will not probably. But I've got this shot in mind, set up my tripod behind a boulder, and this guy stands up. Now, to give you guys an idea, we're not in the same weight class. That guy's about 500 pounds, his horns are this wide, and you don't want to be that close to him. So he's about 10 feet away from me and making his presence known, and I had to change gears. I had a few options, right? So at that point, the history, the practice kicked in, and I took a series of photos of this Dall sheep. My perspective was straight fear. That's all there is to it. I was pretty sure he was going to run me off the side of the mountain. And I think it comes through. The sense of imposition is here. It doesn't matter what you're interested in. No matter what you're shooting, whether it's an action sport, so mountaineering, or an actual action sport like skiing, or you're into just landscapes, if you're into portraits, if you're into urban design, the camera looks both ways, and that's the way it works with the real pros. You see a scene, you understand the scene, you frame a scene, you're looking out and creating, and your understanding of that scene is reflected in the work that you do. So even in the simplest photo to take, daytime landscapes, nothing is changing. The mountains aren't going anywhere, the water's not going anywhere, the light is not going anywhere. You can still impose your perspective on the scene by being a little bit creative. You can flex your viewpoint. So when people start shooting, when they start taking photographs, that choice to shoot what you know and what you're passionate about allows you to jump the line. It allows you to develop the viewpoint, to develop perspective while you're simultaneously learning the skills. So you get to create some meaningful photographs early on in your trajectory, even if you mess something up with your exposure, especially in the digital age now. There's a lot of advantages we can generate for ourselves. So as we think about that perspective, you guys will remember the three things that I packed first in the bag were passion for exploration, a passion for the natural world, and a desire for shared experiences. And as I reached the end of my thesis, I guess I had lost sight of that a little bit. I wasn't quite getting all those things out of my experiences, and I got a very interesting phone call that turned out to change my trajectory, to reroute my path, from a good friend of mine who coincidentally is a Taft alum, Ambrose Toscano. I think he's a class of '97. He worked at the time and still works at a small, oh, I didn't tell this story. That's okay. I'll tell it to you later, next time I'm up here. He worked and still works at a small private school called Sugar Bowl Academy, just north of Lake Tahoe. And at the time, they were looking for a science teacher, high school science teacher, and a dorm parent. So that phone call transpired, and a month later, I was living in Tahoe, and I was working at this school. It's an interesting place. It's a great place to work. It turned out to be a place where I could explore all three of those things, that passion for exploration, connection with the natural world, generate shared experiences, be in charge of them professionally for my students. This is a really fulfilling place. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the academy, but just to give you guys a little background, that's us. We would only need a few rows in this auditorium. It's a ski academy. So we're smack dab on top of Donner Summit in the Tahoe Sierra. This is our mountain. You guys will notice the old chairlift. I just have to point this out as a little digression. This is the old chairlift. You can just barely tell that it's under the snow. It's touching the top of the snow. So this was our 30-foot year. We've grown into that great facility that you guys see here. We're on a great mountain. We have interesting and, more importantly, interested kids doing great things with their lives, getting really excited and following their passions, whether that's skiing or their academic pursuits. They are part of a really meaningful and deliberate community. And as I said, for the purposes of this talk, that school is on top of Donner Summit, so it's right there, right about there, nestled into a very rugged place. And it's rugged, it's robust, so this is not uncommon as we walk to class. Underdressed students fighting the elements, going from class to class, very normal. This is my home. For 11 years, it's been my home. And the title of the show, as you guys probably noticed, is Going Home. And in that context, what I mean going home in the sense that John Muir talks about it, is he talks about thousands of tired people beginning to find out that going to the mountains is going home. He's telling us that wilderness experiences are required for a reset. He's telling us we can find something that maybe we've lost in our day-to-day lives by heading outside. He's essentially reminding us that wilderness is everywhere, wherever we can connect to it. You know, broadly he means that wilderness is a mountain environment, but really to him, and to me, that mountain environment is the Sierra Nevada. In the Sierra, they're really difficult to explain. You can't really box them in. They're 400 miles long, 65 miles across, and at times over 14,000 feet high. Because of where they're situated, they're an exceptionally diverse mountain range to call home. When you're in the Sierra, the peaks, they're in your face. They're not going anywhere. They're ever present. Yet, despite that aggressive facade that they throw at you, every time you cross a pass, every time you go further, there's more. There's more to see. You're consistently changing your viewpoint. You're consistently seeing new vantages. They hold countless rivers and lakes, like Thousand Island Lake here in the Ansel Adams Wilderness in the Central Sierra. The Owens River, which runs through the eastern foothills of the Sierra. The diversity is outstanding. We would never think of this as a mountain stream, but it's a really important one. The Truckee River, my home river, that runs through our town, and which guided the Donner Party on their fateful trip over, sort of, the Sierra. And countless small feeders and streams, like this photo of Lundy Creek, just a small mountain stream that is up any canyon, any turn you make into the Sierra. So we have these tiny things, and then we have these monumental things, right? That's not monumental, but that is. Lake Tahoe is an exceptionally iconic place. It defines a region, it defines a people, and people travel from the globe over to see it. Mono Lake is far more surreal, maybe a little more spooky, maybe it's haunted, I don't know, but it certainly is volcanic. It certainly is old, and it certainly is special. It's a unique place that gives you a unique feeling, and that's what this is all about. Everybody knows about Mono Lake. Everybody knows about Tahoe Lake. Once you start exploring, you see these things, but there are plenty of places that no one knows about. So, this is that original cold spring from the title photo that we talked about, and you can see how my perspective's shifted here. This was the first photo I took in that series as I moved myself down to change my perspective. I think I managed to land on something that was a little closer to what I wanted. This is a waterfall nobody knows about. It's a 10-minute walk from one of the most popular climbing areas, most well-visited climbing areas in the Sierra. I've never seen another soul down here. There's all sorts of secrets that you can find in these places, as we do in the places we're truly close to. So this home, this 400-mile long, 65-mile across, 14,000-foot home, it's huge. But for everybody who calls it home, it's deeply personal. And that's the thing about this discussion, right? We all have our home. We all have this world that we build for ourselves, that we craft for ourselves. The people that we spend our time with, the choices we make, the paths that we go down. Where all that converges, that's our home. So, no matter what you've done that day, even if it has nothing to do with the passions that you're trying to remember, that you buried in your bag, even if your success today was created in a completely distinct fashion from those thoughts, it doesn't matter, right? You don't have to always say to yourself, I need to follow my passion today, because no matter what you do, it's in your backpack. It's following you, it turns out. They never really leave you. So thanks, guys, for your time. I appreciate it. Thanks. I'm looking forward to seeing some of you guys from 5 to 7 tonight in the gallery. Ask me any questions you want. I'm an open book, so, let me know.